Hi guys, Nada here from Techtesters, and here we have a brand new monitor from ASUS, the XG49VQ. This is a super ultra wide 49-inch monitor that has a VA panel, 144 Hz refresh rate, it has HDR and a FreeSync 2 technology. So the last time they released the ultra wide monitor, I think it was 3 years ago, and I was quite wondering what were they doing in all this time, and apparently this is it. So we're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about the hardware, we're going to talk about how this monitor performs, we're going to talk about my experiences with this monitor, and the most important thing, if it's worth the 1100 euros it costs. Let's go. This video is brought to you by the Corsair Crystal 680X, a premium dual chamber case that is easy to work with, offers great performance, and with its beautiful addressable RGB fans, it will turn your PC into a rig that really stands out. Get yours using the links in the description below. With a 49-inch diagonal, the XG49VQ is a huge screen. It is 120 centimeters wide, so make sure your desk is big enough. The resolution is somewhat unusual, 3840 x 1080p, which puts it at 81 pixels per inch. To put that in perspective, that makes it roughly the same as two 27-inch Full HD monitors put together, or just imagine chopping a 55-inch 4K TV in half horizontally. From a physical point of view, it is well made. The stand is large and sturdy, and the frame is solid. Although the bezels look thin, there is quite an edge without pixels. Now, I don't expect many people to put several of these next to each other, but it is worth pointing out. I was a bit surprised to see ASUS not putting any RGB on this monitor at all. Now, we've seen ASUS do LED projections on the table, on the ceiling, extreme RGB on the back of the monitor, and they even delivered some samples in their RGB powered van. But with this monitor, they're keeping it much more simple, and I have to admit, I quite like that myself. On the back, we find one DisplayPort, two HDMI ports, a USB hub, and the audio pass-through. This monitor does come with speakers as well. Now, they won't replace a decent speaker set, and most gamers will use headsets anyway, but it actually sounds quite okay for the occasional use, and it's better than most of the monitors out there. ASUS also kept their excellent OSD control. The combination of a small joystick at the base with a few extra buttons on the side works really well, and as usual, there is a ton of options. There are a dozen or so presets, and there are plenty game-specific features like shadow boost and on-screen crosshairs. They've also included a software package this time around, like we've seen on the ASUS 8027QD, so you can control the monitor settings from within Windows itself, which really makes it a lot simpler than before. Since it's a really large screen, ASUS offers a neat multi-window option, so you can easily split the massive screen in separate squares. You can snap applications too. Let's talk about the actual panel performance. As a VA panel, I expected the contrast to be high, but that turned out to be nothing short of amazing. It is outperforming even the PG27UQ, which has local dimming, something that this screen doesn't have. The display also goes nice and bright, keeping it over 500 nits, which is more than enough to match the HDR 400 label on the box. Though it does make you wonder if HDR 600 would have been possible. Power consumption for a screen this size isn't bad either. Colors out of the box are decent but not amazing. Casual holiday photo editing is fine, but some colors are too far off target for serious creative tasks. Reds and greens are oversaturated a bit, and blues are slightly undersaturated. Gray balance and gamma are spot on, and white balance is a bit on the cold side, but from experience, most gamers prefer that anyway, and if you don't, you can easily change that in the software. If you are considering this screen and want to calibrate the colors perfectly, you can easily do that, as the screen is able to cover the entire sRGB spectrum and more. Something calibration cannot help but is thankfully excellent out of the box is the complete lack of a backlight bleed. And the uniformity tests are great as well, with minimal differences in performance across the entire screen. Keep in mind, those can be sample specific, so do keep an eye on other reviews to make sure we weren't just lucky. Now, you would think that working on such a big monitor is going to be very hard to get used to, but it's not. It's actually quite similar to a two-monitor setup. Now, if you're only used to using one monitor, this is definitely an upgrade, but if you're used to working on two high-resolution monitors, you're definitely gonna miss some of the workspace, you're gonna miss those vertical pixels, and you're definitely gonna miss the sharpness that the higher resolution monitors have. So it's all about gaming pretty much. Now, you can actually split this monitor in half and use one half for console gaming and the other half for PC. But I don't think that many people are gonna do that, because when you buy this monitor, you just want that ultimate ultra-wide experience. Now, of course, only with games that support ultra-wide monitors. But with 144 Hz refresh rate and the contrast and brightness that this monitor has to offer, the gaming experience is actually just great. But there are some things to think about before you consider buying this as a gamer. So let's go over those. First, there are still some games that struggle with ultra-wide resolutions, or games that simply don't support it to avoid competitive advantages, meaning you might still end up with some black bars depending on what you play. Second, if you're coming from a 27-inch or 34-inch Quad HD screen, you'll definitely miss some of the sharpness those have to offer. It doesn't really impact the gaming experience, but if you're used to a higher sharpness, you will definitely see it. So in my opinion, I believe this screen impresses most if you're upgrading from a full HD monitor. However, as ultra-wides have gotten more popular, we've seen more and more games offer support for it. So overall, ultra-wide gaming is in a pretty good spot right now. Tom Clancy's Division 2, for example, really does come to life with a widescreen and decent HDR implementation, and so do Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, so I guess, yeah, kudos to Ubisoft for pushing HDR consistently. And it's not just them. Battlefield is another good example of a game that works well in ultra-wide and offers HDR support. Now, I'm not gonna say it offers a real performance advantage, as even on a 34-inch ultra-wide, it is pretty hard to track what's going on exactly around the edges of the screen. But there is something really cool about having a monitor cover a large part of your peripheral vision. I've always said that 27-inch screens offer a great immersion upgrade over 24-inch models, and this definitely takes a few steps further. Even if you're not focusing on the edges, they do add to the experience, just like when you add a second or a third screen, except you don't need a crazy expensive graphics card to run this resolution. So it is important to consider what types of games you play. If you think The Witcher 3 is still the best game ever, you'll get quite an experience here. Now, obviously it's not for those CSGO fanatics because of the size alone, and it's not the fastest screen in the world, but it does feel and look really smooth at 144 Hz. The fact that you can fine-tune the overdrive feature to your own liking means that depending on your own personal preferences, you can tweak the balance between speed and overshoot. I don't really play racing games myself, but I guess it's pretty obvious that this sort of display should be a racer's dream. Overall, it's safe to say that it's all about that immersion in games that you're experiencing rather than just playing to beat your friends online, because there are other screens for that. It is worth pointing out that this is a FreeSync 2 HDR monitor, so it should be a great match for your Radeon 7, if you have one that is. I did test to see if it works with the NVIDIA G-Sync compatible feature as well, but my experience has been a bit mixed. It actually seemed to work just fine in most games, even with HDR enabled, but we did get some flicker in the Division 2, causing me to turn it off again. It's worth trying out to see if your favorite game works well with it, but I don't think we'll see it listed as officially G-Sync compatible. I guess Navi can't come soon enough. Now, I have to admit that when I saw that this monitor was only 1080p, I was quite disappointed, because having two Quad HD monitor resolution would be so much more impressive for gaming as well as creative tasks. Though that would probably make this monitor twice as expensive, and you would need a RTX 2080 Ti to run it. So this does make some sense. You would want to get an RTX 2070 for this one to run everything on high settings. Now, that being said, this is not a budget option. It is still very expensive. You can actually get three 27-inch 144 Hz 1080p monitors for less, and then use that difference in price to upgrade your RTX 2070 to RTX 2080 while getting a bigger monitor setup and more workspace. And you will have to deal with some bezels, but it's still pretty cool. So there is definitely a lot of pressure on ASUS, both on the spec side as well as on the price. On the other hand, if you're just buying this to compensate for something, it is still much cheaper than buying a BMW. So the ASUS XG49VQ is a bit of an oddball when it comes to monitors. The size alone is going to make some heads turn, pun intended. But when it comes to presets and the lack of pixels, that is definitely not going to make the photo and video editors excited. But when it comes to gaming, it is actually really cool to game on, and not just because of the sheer size and immersion, but the panel performs really well, and there is a lot of features that impact the gaming experience a lot. It is also very well made, and I have to say that I love the design choice they've made this time because it's not so much over the top, which you usually expect to see when it comes to ASUS products. It also has great on-screen control, and it has great software control, which is an upgrade from previous models. But is it worth your money? Now, at this price point, there is a lot of alternatives, even for gamers. But if you want that super ultra-wide experience and you have some extra space on your desk, then this monitor is definitely worth checking out. Now, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about this review and about this monitor. Don't forget to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and see you in the next one. Bye!